Okay, everyone, I think we can start now. First of all, I would like to welcome you to the FIT4RRI webinar about institutional change towards more RRI and open science. My name is Helene Brinken, and I work at the State and University Library in Göttingen and lead communications in FIT4RRI. And I will be moderating this webinar today. And yeah, I would like to start with some housekeeping. So yeah, it would be great if you mute yourself when you're not speaking. And if you have any questions during the presentations, you can just type them into the chat. And we will record this webinar, so the recordings, but also the slides will be available on our website and also on our YouTube channel. So we will share the link with everyone who registered. Yeah, we'll also tweet, of course, and share the links via our social media channels. So first of all, I would like to introduce our speakers today. So we have Adrian Solomon, who's project manager at the Southeast European Research Center in Greece, and he will talk about the methodology of the co-creation experiments we conducted. Afterwards, we will have Raquel Almeida, who is Senior Project Manager at the Training and Qualifications Unit in the Research and Development Department of ICQ in Portugal. And she will talk about how they engaged internal stakeholders from their private company to build and develop an institutional RRI model. And our third speaker will be Mary Jane Monaghan, who is a research assistant at the School of Electric Engineering and Electronics at the University of Liverpool in UK, and she will talk about how they engaged internal stakeholders such as university staff and also external stakeholders such as SMEs to understand how to better embed RRI and ethics as well as science education into research study and innovation development. Yeah, before we come to these presentations, I would like to give you a short introduction into the project and also a definition of what we mean when we talk about responsible research and innovation. So as we all know, science and technology can create risk and ethical dilemmas. So responsible research and innovation seeks to bring research and innovation into the open so that we can anticipate the consequences and also involve the society. Societal actors such as researchers, citizens, policymakers, business or NGOs work together during the research and innovation process so that we can better align the products, the process and the outcomes with the values of the society as well as the needs and their expectations. So in short, we can maybe say that it means to involve all stakeholders at all levels so that we can minimize the potential negative impact. So this webinar is conducted in the frame of FIT4RRI, and this project is a 3-year project, and we work with 12 partners from 9 countries, and we move from the assumption that RRI as well as open science could and should play a much bigger role in research funding and performance organization than they currently do. And what we do to approach this issue is we work on 2 key factors. So we develop training and recommendations for government settings to activate institutional change. And our context and approach is that we have three strands. So the first step was to understand why RRI and open science are not implemented as much as we wish they would be. So we analyzed the trends, barriers, drivers, and interest. Then we had a testing phase. So we conducted 3 co-creation experiments to observe RRI and open science in action, and these will be the topic today. And the third step will be to promote our results and to develop the training tools and guidelines. I just want to say that we already had some webinars, and so about these first steps of this understanding RRI, so about the sectorial analysis and the mapping and benchmarking we did. So you can click on the links as soon as you have the slides. And I just want to mention that our training materials are available at fosteropenscience.eu. So there are the upcoming events, such as the webinar today, but also an RRI and Open Science Trainer Bootcamp, which will be organized soon, and resources. And now I would like to hand over to Adrian, who will give a short introduction into
Thank you very much, Helen, for this great introduction on the project and on this webinar. I'll now share my screen. Just 1 second, please. Okay. Okay, so basically, as Helen mentioned in this very good introduction, is what we tried to have in this project as part of Strand 2, basically. We tried to organize 4 experiments in the sense that we tried to see how can we have an experimental introduction of RRI and open science into organizations using the quadruple helix approach. And we had 4 very good use cases, from which 2 you will see today. After I finish this presentation, is very short introduction over the experiments. So one of the experiments was focused on completely redesigning the R&D unit by infusing RRI principles. Another one was on photonics and optical monitoring, and basically these 2 will be presented later on today. The third one was on material science, and the fourth one on text and data mining, as all these main sectors are key sectors for infusing RRI into organizations, as it was identified by our scale gap analysis performed in the beginning of this project. Now, all the 4 experiments have followed a standardized approach. So we have something called an experiment organization methodology that you can see here on the screen. So this specific methodology was done in co-creation with the project partners, and it is based on various stages, starting from an appraisal stage where we try to identify and map on the RRI pillars that each experiment should focus upon, as well as to identify internal and external stakeholders and consult them in order to trigger the quadruple helix collaboration. Then we had the design stage where we set the objectives for each experiment and prepared the specific collaborative paradigms and approaches that allows the quadruple helix co-creation required to infuse RRI into an ongoing or new research project from those organizations. And then we had the implementation stage that you will see a bit more examples today from the next 2 presentations, how this went. And upmost and the most important part of this, we had a very detailed and unified measurement and monitoring of the experiment, in the sense that we have devised a very detailed list of indicators that allow us to see to what extent RRI and open science was embedded in organizations, in organizational streams, and to what extent this has triggered institutional change and policy changes inside the organizations in terms of ensuring a proper co-creation with the external quadruple helix stakeholders. Because at the end of the day, the whole goal was to see if this embedment is feasible at the end of the day, and the answer is yes, as you will most likely get access to our comparative and final reports from the experiments, and you will see the main lessons learned from this process, in the sense that even though in the beginning, okay, I can say it in a nutshell, even though in the beginning there was a major lack of awareness of RRI in these organizations, but at the end of the experiments, after the 2 years that we started talking about this type of processes, organizations understood the importance and the benefit that RRI does bring to each type of stakeholders, and therefore they are taking active means in order to push it forward and to require more funding to help the organizations properly embed and sustain RRI in all of their future operations. And it doesn't necessarily have to, we don't talk only about universities. We talk about associations, industry, and all type of stakeholders that saw the real benefit of RRI. But now, without more focus on the theory behind this, I would like to move towards the two demonstrations, the two use cases, the experiments. And I think we will start with Raquel, right? We'll start with the first experiment presented by Raquel, focusing on the RRI model. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Raquel, I think.
Yes. Hi. Hello, everyone. I'm Raquel Almeida from ISQ, and I will now share my presentation. Okay, so I will now talk about, after these introductions made by Helene and Adrian, I will now talk about our experiment, which we call Building ISQ RRI Model. I will start by introducing us, who are we, who we are, our goals in this FIT4RRI experiment, what were the main challenges we faced, the RRI pillar selection and training, the lessons we learned. I will talk about some good practices that we took out of it, and I will also talk about our plans to further embed RRI in our work. Okay, so first, who are we? ISQ. We are the biggest technology infrastructure in Portugal. We are a private, non-profit and independent entity with more than 50 years of activity. ISQ has a large industrial and service companies in the country as their associates, so our associates, they are our associates. ISQ has a strong reputation in the Portuguese market. We are a company with over 50 years of experience. We have 16 accredited laboratories. We have 6 contact points in Portugal. And these contact points mean some branches, some laboratories spread around the country. We offer more than 250 specialized services, and we are about 1,400 employees. Not only in Portugal. In Portugal, we are only about 800, but the rest is spread around the world. So the laboratories or the fields that the sectors that we work a lot in are health, pharmaceutical, food, automotive, aeronautical, and agriculture. And some of the services that we offer are in engineering and consultancy, verification and regulatory works, and testing, inspection, training, and we also promote research and development of innovation. This is to give you an idea of where we are. We are in Portugal. Our headquarters is in Portugal. We are a 100% Portuguese company, but we also have branches in several different areas in the world. So, about our goals in this experiment. So, the original goals of this experiment for us was to anchor the project experiment in a co-experiment model to an ongoing project in the energy field. This was one of the first goals in the original experiment. Then we were to test previous outputs on governance setting and sectoral variability with respect to responsible research and innovation. By that time, we chose a project that we had ongoing, which was called MOIBIOS, which was about modeling optimization of energy efficiency in buildings for urban sustainability. You can find the link to the website of that project here. So this was the original goals. Meanwhile, and during the project, we had a change in our goals. And so we decided to build our own RRI model. So we started building ISQ RRI model, and then, of course, build a roadmap, develop a roadmap to implement it. So these were our new goals during the project. The first main challenge that we faced was the fact that once the FIT4RRI project started, RRI was a concept that was unknown to ISQ. So yes, we were familiar and we were very active in corporate social responsibility, but we have never heard of responsible research and innovation concept. So this was the main challenge, the first challenge that we faced. Of course, the challenge led to a second challenge, which was a big learning step. So we had to understand what lies beneath responsible research and innovation concept, and also open science, because the FIT4RRI project was focusing not only RRI, but also open science. So this was our second main challenge. The third main challenge was an internal diagnosis. Okay, so the project team, in which I'm included, we never heard about responsible research and innovation before, but perhaps some other people in ISQ had. So we had to do this, we had to start this internal diagnosis. So we chose some key researchers in our institution, in our organization, and we prepared some interviews to ask about what they knew of the pillars that are encompassed in the RRI concept. So we didn't, okay, we also asked about, do you know what RRI is? But then we went pillar by pillar about what was their understanding of those pillars. So we did this first internal diagnosis to have an X-ray, let's say, of what was our status in terms of RRI and open science. Then, of course, the fourth main step, main challenge in our experiment was to get all ISQ researchers on board. In ISQ, and although we are about 1,400 employees, our research team is composed by about 45 researchers. So, okay, we wanted to get everyone on board. So these were the main challenges that we faced. So our strategy was to first promote an internal workshop, a workshop for our researchers, to not calling it RRI workshop, but joint reflection workshop. We didn't even use the term RRI when inviting researchers, because we didn't want people to have a defensive attitude. Like if you say, let's talk about doing responsible research and innovation, we cannot assume that people are not doing responsible research and innovation. So it's not a good practice, in our opinion, to start by, for people that never heard about it, to let's talk about responsibility and doing our jobs with responsibility. It's not about that. So we invited them for a joint reflection. And ISQ had several teams of researchers spread around the company. So we were not together. We were working in groups, separated groups. So this joint reflection was very important. And when we did this first invitation, and because everyone is always so busy, well, the most heads of units of these groups, of these research groups, sent junior researchers. So these were the first groups, mostly junior researchers were in this first workshop. Well, the first workshop went so well, it was such a success that one of the senior researchers that was in the group said, well, we should do this again. You should do another workshop and now ask senior researchers to come. And that's what we did. We invited senior researchers to come. And then we had a bigger group again. Another workshop was promoted, the same model. And then we had most researchers from ISQ involved in the process, in these workshops. And in these workshops, we would first start by reflecting on what we were doing, on what was going wrong, what was going not so well, and then doing a very, very short presentation on what RRI is about in 10 minutes. That was one of our challenge also, to try to present responsible research and innovation concept in 10 minutes. And there it was. Okay, so, and then we had in the scope of the experiment, we had to select at least 2 pillars. That was one of the requirements of the experiment. So when we were asked to choose these 2 main pillars, and before the workshops, we decided to go for governance and open science and open access. So we wanted to tackle these. We wanted to approach these, to cover these 2 pillars. But after these workshops, and after our internal consultation, after jointly reflecting with all the researchers from ISQ, we then decided, and taking into consideration the concerns that were raised during these workshops, we decided also to go and explore also public engagement, science education, and gender equality. So these were the pillars that we wanted to cover in our experiment. So we started preparing a set of training sessions. And the first training session that we promoted was a session about open science and open access. For that, we invited Pedro Príncipe, which is from the University of Minho, which is also a partner in FIT4RRI project. The University of Minho is an expert. They are experts in open science. And so we thought they were the best people to talk about and to give a workshop on what open science and open access is. First of all, to set a little bit the differences between these two concepts, open access and open science, and then to explore what this means, what open science means. And so this was the first workshop. The second workshop, meanwhile, during the process, ISQ went through a transformation. Well, at least the research and development of innovation activity went through a transformation. So first, in the beginning of the experiment, we had these different and separate groups of researchers, of the teams of researchers working separately in different types of research fields. And then during the process, a new research and development of innovation department was created. And this was a very big surprise for me, for instance. I was part of one of the groups of the researchers, so it was a big change. And for us, the timing was perfect, because then we had everyone aware of what research and responsible research and innovation is, and open science, and we had started the process. So, and the new director of this new department was, before this new department was created, he was one of our colleagues. So he was completely involved in the experiment, and so he took the decision to embed RRI in the new department vision and mission. And so this was very, very important, of course, for the success of our experiment, and I believe for the success of this new department. So we first had the first training workshop on open science and open access, and then the second workshop was on governance. And since we are spread around the country, yes, we had the first big workshop involving all researchers, or most of the researchers of ISQ, on governance, and trying to figure out what makes more sense for us in terms of governance, and taking into account also responsible research and innovation and open science. So we had several sessions of joint reflection to decide on how our governance model would be. And so these took place in several different parts of the country, because we wanted to get everyone really involved. Everyone, and when I say everyone, is every researcher in ISQ. Then we went for science education. We prepared a science education workshop, and we focused a lot on what would make sense to us. And this was very key, what makes sense to us. Let's not forget that we are a private company, we have no public funding, so an RRI model for ISQ had to make sense for ISQ. So this was our strategy. Lessons learned. So what we learned from this was that these first workshops, the two first workshops, the joint reflection sessions, were key to get everyone involved. These were really key, and for us, this is one of the keys for success if we try to implement an RRI model in an institution. The second lesson learned was that actually researchers don't usually think of the things that are involved in responsible research and innovation. So researchers, in these workshops, researchers were faced with issues and ideas that are not usually on the table in their professional lives and work routines. Yeah, we are we are all always so busy. So it happens, sometimes we don't have time to reflect on actually what we are doing and what we are working on. So these workshops were very important also to think and reflect in a joint session on these things. Third lesson was that tailor-made training sessions on the selected pillars constituted an important awareness-raising action, but are also very important for an organization institutional change. It has to make sense for the organization. So perhaps some things that are included in the pillars make a lot of sense and are very, very close to the kind of activity that an organization promotes, and some others are not so suited to or not so close to the activity that the organization or the research activity that the organization entails. So tailor-made training sessions for us was also one of the lessons learned. It's important. It's very important to make it for the needs of the organization and for what makes sense for the organization. A fourth lesson learned was that, and this was one of our visions and one of the visions that we wanted to pass, is that RRI, responsible research and innovation, is a way of doing research and development of innovation using a long-term perspective. And this is in terms of the kind of world we want to live in. So that's why we believe it's so important. We have to think of the long-term perspective. We have to think of the consequences of the innovation that we are working on. And this is very important, and this was also a lesson learned for us. And last but not least, one of the most important lessons learned in this experiment for us is that responsible research and innovation is a flexible model. It's not a concept that, or it's not a model that one size fits all. No, it has to make sense for the organization that is applying it, that it's implementing a model, that it's embedding this in their way of doing research and development of innovation. So these were the main lessons learned with our experiment. Good practices, in our opinion, in our experiment was that the selection of pillars was done based also on the concerns of the researchers. So it's not only one person or two persons or a small team of persons thinking of what is most important for the organization. It's about listening to all the concerns or to the concerns of the researchers and then taking a decision on what are the pillars that are most important to cover or to approach in an experiment such as ours. Another good practice for us was that the training sessions on the selected pillars constituted an important awareness-raising action, and again, they were tailor-made. And we consider that we are planting the seed. So it's not that we will see the results of what we were doing in the last months and year and a half, about 2 years. It's not that we will see the change immediately. I believe that responsible research and innovation for a company such as ours that had never heard about it before, a change takes time. So we believe that we are planting the seed, and we believe that the results will come out soon. In terms of our plans to further embed responsible research and innovation in our work, so we are building our responsible research and innovation implementation roadmap. We want to engage more with the society Although we do with some of the quadruple helix actors, perhaps we are not so successful with others, so we want to be better at that, and that's why, and we will also use the public engagement pillar on that, in that sense. We are setting RRI indicators, so in our department, so we plan to measure our indicators every year and report on them. We plan to continue responsible research and innovation training, and we also plan to make it compulsory for each new researcher that the company takes in. And we also plan to keep spreading the word. After our experiment, we started spreading the word, and we are now bringing responsible research and innovation concepts to new projects that we are getting involved in. And these are some of the pictures, the challenges that we are launching to research centers that we work with. And we have been doing this since our experiment. Thank you. And this was my presentation on our experiment.
Thank you very much, Raquel. And now we will have the presentation by Mary Jane. So if you could start sharing your screen, that would be great. We cannot hear you yet, but you're not muted. Maybe there's something wrong with your microphone. No. Maybe you get now? So maybe try to reconnect. So maybe we can just take a few minutes to fix this technical problem. But maybe someone already has questions now. So please, yeah, if you have, type them in the chat. So maybe Raquel and Adrian can already think about them. And meanwhile, we'll try to fix the microphone problem.
Yeah, actually, this is something that we discussed also in the project, you know, in all our past meetings, you know, Raquel, it would be very interesting to know, because your case study of embedding RRI is quite unique. I think you're the first organization that does this. And my question is, I mean, do you think that after some time, you know, of course you cannot estimate now, but after some time, will there be a concrete return on investment from doing RRI? By return on investment, and it's not only money itself as money, but for example, you know, better outputs, more engaged stakeholders. What do you think?
Yes, of course we believe that. Otherwise we wouldn't be implementing and embedding RRI in our activity. Yes, we believe that it will improve our activity, and it will improve our results and the success of our research results. That's why we are so engaged in this. And that's why we decided to build our own RRI model.
And did you do, for example, some scenario planning, I mean, for the next years, or you didn't consider this impact yet? You know, how it will...
Sorry, can you repeat?
If, for example, if you already done some scenario planning, in the sense that you already, let's say, done some forecasting of how this would happen over the next years, or not yet?
Not yet. We are now designing the indicators that for this new research and development and innovation department, and then, of course, when designing the indicators, we will also think of what are the results that we expect to see. So let's see. It's too early yet, Adrian, to talk about this. This is an ongoing process. We also still want to promote a workshop on public engagement, and I think this is very important for us, in the sense that we expect that to improve our ability to reach some kind of public that we have not been so successful in reaching. So I hope I answered your question, and that
No, definitely.
that Mary Jane is back or not.
Let's see, did we manage to fix Mary Jane?
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
Don't worry. There's always something happens. So it's
Right, I'll try and sorry everybody, I'll try and share my screen now.
perfect. I think it works now. I know if you just make it big, yeah, perfect.
Right. Here we go. I'm Mary Jane Monaghan from the University of Liverpool, and I was the research assistant on the Liverpool experiment. So I'm going to tell you a bit more about what we did. Firstly, the aims of the experiment was to explore and discuss ethics and science education issues with various stakeholders. We chose ethics and science education as the two pillars from the RRI framework to focus on as part of the experiment. We wanted to see how these perceptions using the optical monitoring system as a case study for the research project. We wanted to also identify other ethical issues and challenges that impinge on research. So we asked all the stakeholders involved to think about the optical monitoring system case study, but also draw on other experiences that they had of different research projects and innovation technology that they have been involved in. We wanted to increase the awareness and perceptions of different people, because when people work in isolation in SMEs or in the university, they often don't get the views, ethical views of other people involved in research projects. We wanted to also identify any weaknesses, barriers, communication issues with science education within research institutions, industry and society. This meaning how science is educated to different people, so how it's educated to society, different people within the university. We can often find that there are definitely communication issues with this when talking about scientific research within society. It's often difficult to get across your research in the correct language. We also explored the understanding and perceptions of science education with the stakeholders to see what they thought about educating society on scientific research and whether they thought it was beneficial. And this was all within hopes to identify issues that could lead to improvements in the way in which science education was delivered by institutions and by SMEs within the community, and the way in which researchers embed ethics into their research. So the optical monitoring system case study that was chosen to use is a device that is fitted into the living quarters of people who are in receipt of social housing care, often with health issues, very minor health issues that may just need a bit of assistance. The device monitors patterns of movement and behaviour and will alert people who are working with the individual that they may be moving around a bit less, maybe visiting the kitchen a bit less, and this can lead to health complications. It was designed to help improve the amount of falls that are happening and to try and stop people being admitted to hospital. So when we conducted our focus group with the participants, as I said before, we asked them to focus on their own research, but also think about the optical monitoring system research and how that would be affected by the embedment of RRI and ethics and science education into that research study. So we explained the research to them and we asked them to think about what barriers and challenges this would have in the dissemination of ethics and science education. So these were the list of stakeholders that we identified with. The internal stakeholders is listed there, including PhD researchers right up to senior researchers and people who worked on the ethics committees and director of ethics, and external researchers, where we had 6 SMEs who were manufacturers and providers of health and social care solutions. So devices similar to the optical monitoring system that would go into people's homes and would assist people. And we also have people working around those types of innovation. So the eHealth Cluster, which is an organisation that helps put these devices into people's homes, and NHS people and Liverpool City Council, a provider of social care. We followed this methodology when we conducted the experiment. So we had initially we sent out via email or post an internal questionnaire, and the questionnaire was to gain a benchmark of people's understanding of RRI ethics and science education. So what they already knew, if they knew anything, and what their perceptions of ethics and science education were at present. So we asked them for their awareness of ethics and science education, the awareness of and motivation to implement it within their current role and within their current settings, awareness of any policies that already existed, and whether they engaged with other researchers, industry, society and policymakers when they were conducting research. We then moved on to a focus group where all the participants were invited to come along. At the focus group, we introduced the optical monitoring system research, told the participants about that, and then we asked them to discuss opinions and views on RRI ethics and science education. There was 3 activities that we conducted with the participants, and they worked in small groups, which were mixed groups of internal and external stakeholders. We asked them to think about barriers against the diffusion of ethics and science education and come up with what was challenging and what was stopping people learning about ethics and science education. Then after discussing this, we asked them to come up with some policies and guidelines that might be helpful to use in institutions or organisations to better embed ethics and science education. And we also asked them to come up with some solutions in how we could involve society more in research, because this was one of the main barriers that came out of the initial questionnaire, was that people were feeling that engaging with society was difficult. So we asked them to try and come up with some solutions. We then moved on to a one-to-one interview stage. Most of these were done face-to-face, as this was what the participants preferred, with a few being done over the telephone. And I asked the participants 6 questions. They were all asked the same questions. And we wanted to gain a better understanding of the reflection of how they could make changes. So after the focus group, we asked them to go away and reflect on what changes they could make within their role where they worked at the moment and what they could do moving forward. So I asked them about collaboration opportunities and whether they thought that they would have any opportunity to collaborate with other people when they were doing research and innovation, and what benefits they would get from this and what benefits the other person would get from this. We also asked them about what policies they would need to help embed ethics and science education more into research and innovation. And we also asked them what they would like to see activity-wise and learning-wise from a up-and-coming workshop. That was our next step. We wanted to make sure that the stakeholders and participants would engage in the workshop and would be able to gain something from it, as it was a learning opportunity. So we wanted them to set the challenges and the questions. So at the workshop, we invited the participants to come along to, as I said, a learning opportunity to further develop their understanding of RRI and ethics and science education. We did a brief outline again of what RRI was, because it had been quite a while since the focus group. So we refreshed on what we were doing and what ethics meant within RRI pillars and what science education meant within these pillars. And then we used Lego and Play-Doh to make models of what ethics research means to the participant. So each person made their own model of a representation of ethics, and they were then asked to discuss this on the table. They were asked to look at each other's models and note similarities and differences, And then moving on in the workshop with further discussion, we were asked to put all the models together and try to come up with a co-creation of what would work for everybody. Again, the tables were all mixed, so it was internal and external participants. And sometimes that did prove difficult because what an internal stakeholder would need from an ethics model might be different to what an external one would need. So working together, it really helped them understand the needs of different organisations when you're developing ethics and science education. Finally, I sent out again the questionnaire. It was a repeat of the first questionnaire, and this was to measure any development of understanding. We asked the same questions again and did an evaluation form for the workshop and the focus group. So a quick overview of the results from the first questionnaire. It was used to identify, as I said, participants' perceptions, their understanding of ethics and science education, and their motivation to implement ethics and science education, and how much they engaged with the quadruple helix groups during the research. At the focus group, we did an evaluation form afterwards, and the feedback from this said, participants said that it was a good mix of perspectives of ethics and science education. They particularly highlighted that they found it useful to talk about barriers and changes, and they felt that they could go on then to use what they learnt about responsible research and innovation and open science within their current roles. A lot of the participants also said that it gave them time to reflect on their own views of ethics and science education. If you're working in an environment where you use ethics and science education a lot, it's not very often that you take a step back and reflect on how you're actually doing that, and making sure that you are doing it responsibly and you are thinking about the end users, and everyone's opinions are in there. So it was useful for them to be able to take a step back and think about ethics and science education in their current roles. The interview summary, so I looked at all the interviews I conducted, and it was highlighted the importance of knowledge exchange. So a lot of the participants were saying how important it was to be able to speak to different stakeholders during research and innovation, particularly people who were going to be benefiting from the research, benefiting from the innovation. This was an important opinion to be able to gather, and the knowledge exchange, being able to speak and take people's opinions and listen to their opinions, and also give in your own. So it's a two-way street. Everyone helps everybody out. The co-design of the monitoring system, it was something that was highlighted, making sure that it was done with the end user having input. This way, it will be more well received by the end user. It will be beneficial to them. There'll be less changes need to be made. It saves money because it would just do what it needs to do. This was also the case for a lot of the other technology designs that we talked about, that the other SMEs were developing. They also felt that involving an end user at an early stage is definitely important, because they're the person who's going to be using it, and they're often the people who can tell you what they need it to do. So it's better, it's more well received, and it saves time and money on research. Ethics needs to be communicated better to all stakeholders. It was highlighted in the interviews that sometimes, especially academic people, when they're going out into the community to speak to members of society, they often aren't able to communicate ethics very well, probably because it's something that they're not used to communicating, or especially with an RRI framework, it's not fully understood by them. So being able to communicate it well to other people is something that needs to be worked on. And collaboration with the two-way relationship, it keeps society informed as to what research and innovation is happening. So it also helps other researchers. So if they know what is already going on and what research is already being conducted, then it means that they can help out if they've got an idea, or that they're not going to do the same research at the same time. So in the workshop, we also filled out an evaluation at the end of the workshop with all the participants, and the feedback was that it was a very practical way to illustrate challenges. A lot of the participants were unsure about what to do with their Lego when they first got it, but the more they thought about it, the more they realised what challenges they were actually facing on a personal level when it came to the embedment of ethics and science education. They said they learned the different interpretations of science and of ethics and science education between stakeholders. So a few of the people who attended the workshop weren't able to attend the focus group, so it was interesting for them to learn the different perceptions. It gave participants plenty to think about moving forward, and they were all able to display how RRI and open science can be incorporated in future projects. As part of the evaluation, we asked them to say what they were going to do moving forward in terms of promoting RRI to colleagues and making sure it was included in future research innovation projects that they were going to be involved in. So this is a comparison between the first and the final questionnaire. The blue bars being the first questionnaire and the orange being the second questionnaire. It shows that there was an improvement across all questions that were measured on a 5-point scale in terms of their understanding and perceptions of ethics and science education. It shows that the most improved was question 4, which was a question about the awareness of implementation of science education, and question 6, which was the institutional science education policies. These showed a vast improvement between the first questionnaire and the second questionnaire. I also subcategorised the questionnaire into ethics understanding, ethics motivation, science education understanding, and science education motivation. These were measured on a 5-point scale, given a maximum possible answer of 15 with 3 questions each. Again, you can see that there was an improvement across the whole cohort from the first and the second questionnaire, with science education understanding showing the most improved. And this is a comparison between the first and the second questionnaire on how the researchers said they would engage with the quadruple helix groups. In the first questionnaire, most people were reluctant to engage or didn't already engage with anyone from the quadruple helix, but in the second questionnaire they said they were much more likely to engage with particularly other researchers and policymakers when conducting research. So the summary of the overall findings shows the result that there was an improvement in attitude towards ethics and science education. It also shows that there was an improvement in involving various stakeholders in all stages of research. We also asked the participants who they would contact with regards to implementation of ethics and science education within their employment or organisation or institute. This was measured with a yes/no question, and the results had no significant change from test 1 and test 2, with the participants still stating that they were unsure as to who to contact within their personal organisations or institution. The main challenges that we faced when conducting this research was gaining ethical approval took longer than we anticipated in the early stages, which led to not being able to interact with our stakeholders as early as possible. So not being able to build up those relationships. If we were able to build up better relationships, we would better understand how to motivate the stakeholders to engage with all aspects of the project. We had some participants who were only able to come to certain parts of our data collection and methodology, and that was reflected probably in the fact that we weren't able to motivate them more into being able to come, as we didn't have them relationships. There is also a lack of awareness of ethics within our culture. This project was advertised through the university website with a call out for participants, as well as through the eHealth Cluster newsletter. Some people may have seen that it was about ethics and either thought it was unimportant or something that they already knew, so they didn't feel a need to engage with the research. This may have contributed to the fact that we had a bit of a low uptake in participants. If we would have had more participants, it would have proved better discussions and more opinions. So improving on that would be to have more time to raise awareness of ethics. And we also didn't have any of the beneficiaries of the monitoring system were able to make the focus group or the workshop because of distance. Where we were holding these events was too far for these organisations to travel to. They were going to be care organisations that were going to be installing the monitoring system into their clients' homes, and it would have been really important to have them come to these types of discussions, as they would be the people who would know what the end users needed. So I went out and interviewed some care organisations on a time that suited them, as they weren't able to make the focus group and workshop. Making it more accessible to them may have meant that they were able to attend, which would have proved invaluable. So lessons learned, as I said, is raising awareness before the start of the project, maybe having some initial workshops and presentations on what RRI was before we enlisted participants, just to raise the awareness and hopefully get more participants to take part. And having an end user from the monitoring system, someone whose house the monitoring system was going to be installed in, would have definitely benefited research and innovators to better understand what would be needed from them. This was a group that we didn't engage with, and may have benefited the research. The next steps we've got planned are, we are developing at the moment a mandatory ethics and RRI training for postgraduate researchers. This is to be trialled in the School of Electrical Engineering and Electronics and Computer Science, and is going to be at the beginning of next semester. This is in the hopes that this training will be rolled out across all disciplines across the university and will be completed by everyone before next September. We are currently working with the ethics department to get this training put together and get it rolled out. We also are showcasing the research at a Love Data event in February. This event is being held in Liverpool, and it is in collaboration with the University of Liverpool and John Moores University. So hopefully different people will attend that through John Moores University, and we will then be able to showcase the research within that university as well as our own, to get the word out there a bit more. We are in the middle of writing an academic paper on the research results, hopefully to be published very soon, and we will be taking part in more up and coming events to further disseminate through the university and any other channels that I can find. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm sorry about the technical delays at the beginning.
Thank you very much, Mary Jane. So now we heard two very interesting use cases, very different use cases for implementing institutional change. And yeah, we have some time if you would like to ask our speakers some questions. You can just type them into the chat, or you can, I think you can also raise your hand if you would like to ask them directly.
In the meantime, can I ask one quick question?
Yes.
If that's possible. So basically, Mary Jane, thank you very much for the presentation. How do you keep your stakeholders engaged? Because this is quite a sensitive topic on which you had the experiments. How did you manage to keep their interest in your work?
Very good question, Adrian. Well, using different types of approaches to the workshop, so using interactive workshops where they could learn and develop and speak to different people was definitely a positive. And the Lego, the Lego was so much fun, and working in an office, you don't get to play.
Super.
So we have one question in the chat. I think I'm just going to read it out. So in terms of engaging of researchers, are they interested in being involved in RRI during the research projects? And as a continuous tool need within the research and development process? So I think it's maybe a similar question to Adrian's, like how to keep them involved. Are they in general interested in being involved, or was it difficult to get them on board?
I think that all my participants definitely had a genuine interest, with a lot of them working in research anyway. And the SMEs obviously wanted to make their products better. So if they were able to engage with researchers project. When we were talking about being engaged in future research projects, definitely they did say that they would like to be involved from beginning to end of a research project, not just seen as a participant who takes part, but being involved in the design and being involved in the write-up stages, and every aspect of it was definitely something that came across in our workshops. I hope that helps.
Well, what I can say is that we want the RRI to be embedded in our practices. So our goal is that researchers do things in a way, or practice their activity or do their research with an RRI embedment. So they don't think they are doing RRI. It will be part of their processes. It will be part of the way they do things. That's our goal. So it's not like, oh, now I'm doing RRI. No, it's you reflect on things, you become aware of things, you think of different ways or better ways to do things, you think of consequences, and then this slowly becomes embedded in the way you do your research. That's how we see things. But yes, not initially, of course. In the beginning, it will be a very conscious process, I believe. But yes, most, because there's always those who never want to engage in anything new, but most of them, yes, they are pretty much interested, yes. The objective also, sorry, the objective is also that they don't see it as another thing to do, not another checklist or another to accumulate to the other things that they have to do in their research. No, it will be part of the things that they already do. That's my answer.
Thank you. So Lucia, I hope this answered your question. Seems like it. She says thank you. If anyone else has any question, yeah, feel free to type them in the chat. In the meanwhile, I can maybe also ask one question to Adrian. So you're coordinating these, actually 4 experiments. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit on, because they seem so different, like, will the results be comparable, or like, what will you do?
That's a very good point. Well, actually, what we compared is mostly the quadruple helix engagement process and the outcomes, in the sense that we don't necessarily compare on the topic. You know, if you understand what I'm trying to say, we're just comparing the process. So in terms of the comparison, and this is going to be made available when our deliverable will be published, formally published and uploaded in the portal, because it's an open access document. You can everyone that is interested can get access to the specific comparative analysis of the 4 experiments, in the sense that you will see there how, for example, each experiment complements the gaps in RRI embedment processes through quadruple helix. So each experiment has done a specific bit of this job, but due to the nature of each institution, their outcomes are quite different. So just to give a quick example, in University of Liverpool, of course, because it's traditional, let's put it this way, traditional standard university, okay, you have a proper structure, like a fixed structure with committees, boards, you know, and a proper hierarchy that influences the way RRI is being embedded in the institution. While for Open University, that has done a text and data mining experiment, they are completely decentralized. So their research teams are completely independent, and there is no upper structure that governs the way they do their research. So, which means that they have a bit more flexibility, which means that their challenge was even higher to find a proper motivation to adopt RRI, because it's not the top-down thing that tries to impose on them. So all these challenges, as well as many other peculiarities, are explained in this open access report that we can share with all the interested participants. Just feel free to contact us at any point. I hope that covers. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that will be very useful. And also one thing to mention maybe is that we also plan to conduct a webinar about the other experiments. So that might be also interesting for some of you. Yeah, are there other questions? So far, it doesn't look like it. Yeah, but as Adrian already said, please feel free to contact us at any point if you would like to have more information, or we can exchange more experience. And then I would say thank you to everyone who was speaker here today, and also thank you to you as participants for joining us. As I mentioned, we will make the recording available and also the slides. You will find them at our FIT4RRI.eu /training website. There we will link to them, to the link to our YouTube channel. And we will also, there was this event on the Foster portal, so we will also link all slides and upload them on the Foster portal. So I hope that was useful, and thank you for joining us today.